Hey guys, this is Clinton Jeff from UnleashThePhones.com, and here's a quick look at the Sony Xperia T2 Ultra. This is the dual SIM edition, so technically the name of it is the Xperia T2 Ultra Duo, which is quite a huge name. Now, phablets were huge last year, and there were a lot of manufacturers that made huge phones with 6-inch screens. Sony also made a phone with a 6.4-inch screen called the Sony Xperia Z Ultra, which was a very high-spec machine with a Snapdragon 800 processor, and it was slim and waterproof as well. HTC and Samsung and even Nokia started flooding the market with their own phablets, which were all priced a little bit more affordably, something that Sony didn't have, and that's why we have the Xperia T2 Ultra today. The Xperia T2 Ultra is a 6-inch smartphone with a 720p display, Snapdragon 400 processor, a 30 megapixel camera at the back, and a pretty powerful battery powering all of it. Is that all worth the price tag? Here's what I think. Alright, starting with design, the first thing you'll notice about the T2 Ultra is how huge it is. I can barely fit it in the frame of my camera right now. It measures 165 by 83 by 7.6 millimeters, but thankfully Sony has decided to keep it slim, so it is really slim and also a little bit light at 172 grams. The build quality is mostly made out of hard plastics. It's much better plastics than you find on a Samsung phone. As you can see, the unit we have is a little banged up, but all in all, the build quality is pretty solid feeling. There's this really annoying fake imitation metal on the edge, which tries to make the T2 Ultra appear more premium than it actually is. At the front, there's a 6-inch 720p tri-luminous display. The 720 by 1280 pixels of resolution on a 6-inch display might be disappointing for some folks, but I personally thought that the resulting 245 ppi of pixel density was pretty okay. If you're used to a 1080p screen, you might not like how text appear on the screen, but I don't think it's that bad unless you're looking at the T2 Ultra's display really close. The brightness of the display is also something that's worth talking about. The display can get quite bright, as you can see, but the coating on the panel is way too reflective, so if you're using this outdoors, you're gonna have a hard time looking at that screen. Color reproduction is also slightly off, with greens appearing slightly oversaturated, but whites are pretty accurate and the display looks pretty good overall. Viewing angles are also a little bit annoyingly narrow, but it's much better than the Xperia Z and the Xperia Z1's display. Also at the front are the two speaker grills, but the first grill at the top is just a earpiece, while at the bottom you have a microphone behind it, so it's not really two speakers at the front. You'll also find a front-facing camera and a proximity sensor at the top. The Xperia T2 Ultra uses navigation buttons that are on screen, so you'll see no capacitive button. Moving on, Sony has done a really strange job with port placements on the Xperia T2 Ultra. At the top of the phone, you'll find no ports at all. Similarly, at the bottom of the phone, you'll find no ports at all here either. Instead, the T2 Ultra has a micro USB charging port right over there on the left side, and a micro SD card slot over here. And on the right side, you have a whole bunch of ports with the 3.5mm audio jack, the slot for both the SIM cards if you have the dual SIM version, and the power screen lock key, the volume rocker, and a dedicated camera key as well. The buttons all have really bad feedback to them, so they feel a little cheap when you're using them. The headphone jack is also at a very strange location. It should have been at the top or the bottom of the phone, but it's really annoying when you listen to music and you have to put this in your pocket if you can fit into your pocket. Similarly, the micro USB charging port on the side makes it very awkward to use the T2 Ultra in portrait mode when you're charging the phone. I should also point out that the T2 Ultra is not waterproof like the Xperia Z series, so the protective flaps over here are literally just to make the phone look more uniform. The back panel of the phone is also made out of a glossy plastic, which seems to attract fingerprints very easily, as you can see. We have the black version for review, which seems to attract stains from almost everything it comes into contact with. The white version of the T2 Ultra definitely looks much better. The back panel is also not removable, but underneath you have a 3000 mAh battery powering everything. Alright, coming to hardware, the T2 Ultra is powered by a 1.4 GHz quad-core Snapdragon 400 processor with an Adreno 305 GPU. The Snapdragon 400 is Qualcomm's lower mid-range chipset, and as such you shouldn't really expect amazing performance out of the T2. But luckily there's 1 GB of RAM on board, which allows Sony to make sure that the interface moves fast enough without any lag or slowdowns. Though that being said, the interface isn't exactly buttery smooth as well. And if you have any heavy apps or heavy games that you're playing that are intensive on the processor, you will see things start to slow down. Apart from that, there's 8 GB worth of internal memory, out of which you only really get to use about 4.6 GB. That's not much, but thankfully there's a micro SD card slot, which means you can expand on that memory. In terms of connectivity, the T2 Ultra features LTE in some regions and 3G, Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi Direct, Bluetooth 4.0, AGPS, NFC, and even DLNA support. Speaking about the dual SIM nature of the phone, if you're getting the dual SIM version of the T2 Ultra, the T2 Ultra is a active dual SIM phone, which means you can use both the SIM cards at the same time because there are two transceivers built into the phone. This means if you're on a phone call using one SIM card, you can also get calls from the second SIM card when it's in use. Unlike standby dual SIM card phones, where if you're on a phone call with one SIM card, the other SIM card gets temporarily blocked. So it's nice to know that the T2 Ultra is a dual SIM phone. Apart from that, the dual SIM mechanism on this phone works just like any other dual SIM Android phone with a dedicated SIM card management app. The app allows you to assign the primary SIM card and rename the SIM cards, and you can even set data preferences if you want. Alright, coming to software, the Sony Xperia T2 Ultra runs Android 4.3 Jelly Bean, which is not the latest version of Android, unfortunately. Sony has their own interface on top of this. Compared to Android UIs like Samsung's TouchWiz UI or HTC Sense, Sony's UI looks comparatively more lightweight. Sony also chooses to differentiate the UI by giving their users apps like the Walkman app and the Album app and their own specific applications to make their experience that much more different. The UI is simple and straightforward to use, and you'll find that all the basic built-in Android apps have all been reskinned with Sony's UI on top. Since this is a phablet, Sony also offers their small apps, which is a little application that pops up when you press the multitasking menu. The small apps are little apps that you can open up from the multitasking menu that will hover over whatever else you're doing. You can open a maximum of maybe 5, and you can have all of these running around the screen at the same time. I'm not a huge fan of the small apps, but I know some people that are big fans of Sony small apps and love using it on their phones. With the 6-inch screen, you have much more space to use them. There are also some other minor tweaks to make using the T2 Ultra more easier. For example, you can double tap the home button to bring down the notification bar, as you saw right there. This is very cool because you can't always reach the top of the screen because it's such a huge screen. Similarly, you can also do things like, for example, when you're typing out a message, you can choose to pull up the one-handed keyboard, which will move to one side, allowing you to type with one finger. That being said, typing or even using the phone with one hand is still really hard to do. To comfortably use the T2 Ultra, you still need both hands. So that's about it for messaging. The messaging app is pretty nice and uses Sony's default keyboard. Sony's default keyboard works really well. No complaints as such. Apart from that, there's Google Chrome for all your web browsing needs, and websites generally look pretty good on that 720p 6-inch display. Moving on to multimedia, Sony has replaced the Android Gallery app with their own Album app, which looks really nice and allows you to look at all the images you want, and you can pinch to zoom in or out on these images. It's really one of the best looking gallery apps out there. Similarly, Sony's Walkman app is also one of the best looking music player UIs out there. Even their Movies app allows you to pull in information about any videos that you're watching in case it's a popular movie or a TV show. There's support for almost every popular video format, including DivX, XVID, MKV files, all up to 1080p in resolution. When you're watching videos or listening to music, the audio via the headphone jack isn't that great, but surprisingly the loudspeaker on the T2 Ultra is really loud. The speaker sounds pretty full and doesn't distort, which makes watching videos or listening to music through the loudspeaker a really good experience on the Sony Xperia T2 Ultra. Alright, talking about the camera, the Sony Xperia T2 Ultra comes with a 13 megapixel camera. The camera uses a 1x3.06 inch size Sony Exmor RS sensor with a f2.2 aperture lens, and to make use of all that hardware is Sony's camera app. Sony's camera app is pretty simple and straightforward to use, and has a whole bunch of modes that you can check out. The Superior Auto mode is the default mode, and the camera shoots in 6:9 aspect ratio, which is a 9 megapixel shot. If you want to shoot a 13 megapixel image, you have to change that aspect ratio to 4:3. The Superior Auto mode is one of my favorite camera modes on the Sony phones because it uses this very cool scene recognition technology which can detect up to 36 different scene presence. There's also a different HDR mode in case you want to use that, an augmented reality mode, and even other things like background defocus if you want, and social live, and even a manual mode in case you want to manually tweak the pictures you're about to take. Image quality is pretty okay. Images are pretty good with accurate color reproduction in most cases and correct exposure and white balance. Some images have a slightly colder result overall, but images are generally pleasant with plenty of detail in them. With indoor and low light images, the camera does a pretty good job of keeping noise to a minimum with clean, very well balanced results. Though that being said, the white balance can sometimes be completely wrong in low light situations. but it's generally pretty alright. And there's also a single LED flash to help take night pictures. You can check out these camera samples over on the blog because I posted them at unleashthephones.com. Similarly, when it comes to video quality, the T2 Ultra can record very smooth 1080p HD videos at up to 30 frames per second. The camera does a pretty good job of adjusting exposure when you're panning around with your camera. There's no drop frames or visible artifacts that creep in, and even the recorded audio was pretty clean and solid. Again, you can check out a video camera sample right over on the blog. Alright, coming to call quality, the T2 Ultra is pretty good in call quality. The earpiece is very strong and sounds rather clean with no distortion, even at the highest volume. Callers on the other end said that they could hear us loud and clear thanks to the noise cancellation. Pretty much the best thing about the T2 Ultra has to be its battery life. There's a 3000 mAh battery, and Sony promises 24 hours worth of talk time in 3G with the T2 Ultra and almost a month and a half in terms of standby time. In our test, I was able to play a video back for about 10 hours before the T2 Ultra gave up, and that's pretty insane battery life compared to most phones nowadays. And the fact that you can still get this great battery life even though it's a dual SIM phone is something that's pretty huge. That being said, this great battery life does come at a cost. It takes about 3.5 hours to fully charge the battery on the T2 Ultra from 0 to full, and that's a little bit annoying. To conclude, Sony has done a pretty good job with the T2 Ultra. Granted, it's a huge phone, you can't really expect anything less from a 6-inch phablet. Plus, it's very slim and light for the screen size. With that being said, I'll be lying if I didn't say I wish this was a 1080p screen. Still, the screen isn't that bad, and this is the longest battery life I've experienced on a phablet phone so far. The 30 megapixel camera at the back is pretty good, and the dual SIM active standby functionality is pretty great. This kind of makes the T2 Ultra one of the best dual SIM mid-range phones that you can get right now. Of course, there are other phablets out there like the Sony Xperia Z Ultra, which comes to mind, which costs a slightly bit more than the T2 Ultra right now. Though its battery life is less, it does have an 8 megapixel camera without flash, which means camera quality isn't as good as the T2 Ultra. But it is a bigger phone and it is waterproof and it has a faster processor compared to the T2 Ultra. Similarly, there are also other 6-inch phones like the HTC One Max with its boom sound speakers, or the LG G Pro 2 with its OIS 13 megapixel camera, which are all good enough phones, but they all cost a lot more than the T2 Ultra. What Sony's done is pretty amazing because you have an affordable phone that's a very appealing mid-range phablet, and it also has the best battery life so far on any phone in this price range. That's about it, guys. That's what I think about the Sony Xperia T2 Ultra. As always, if you have any questions, let me know right in the comment section below, or check out the full written review over at unleashthephones.com.